All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are going all in on Bitcoin.
Bitcoin in 2025, to be exact.
Yeah. So if you're listening, you're probably already pretty plugged into the crypto world, at least a little bit.
Definitely.
But you want to look ahead, like what's coming down the pipeline for Bitcoin.
Exactly.
So that's what we're going to do today. We got a ton of research here, all kinds of stuff, expert analysis, institutional forecasts, market predictions, the whole shebang.
Trying to get a good overall picture of what we think might happen with Bitcoin in 2025.
Okay, so first things first, just a quick snapshot of where Bitcoin's at right now.
Big milestone, actually. As of today, February 17, 2025, one Bitcoin is worth $96,669.46.
Wow, that's a lot of money.
It is.
Almost $100,000 for one Bitcoin.
And, looking at the market cap, it's $1.91 trillion.
Trillion, with a T. So, I mean, that just goes to show, right?
Huge.
Like, Bitcoin's not just some fringe thing anymore.
Definitely not.
It's a major player. And the price, I know recently it's been kind of, what do they call it, consolidating.
Yeah, consolidating a little bit, sort of hovering around that $95,000 support level.
So, holding steady, for now at least.
Oh.
I guess we should probably talk about the elephant in the room, or the Bitcoin in the room, I should say. The halving.
The halving, the big one.
Yeah, because that happened back in 2024, and a lot of people are pointing to that as a big reason why we're seeing this sort of, this price action right now.
Makes sense.
But I think it'd be helpful for some listeners maybe to just kind of back up and explain exactly what the halving is, because it's kind of a weird concept, right?
Yeah, so imagine this. Bitcoin miners, they're the ones who are the backbone of the whole system. They're processing transactions, making sure everything's secure.
The ones keeping the lights on.
Yeah, exactly. And for doing that, they get rewarded with Bitcoin.
Right.
But every 4 years or so, this reward gets cut in half.
Halved, like literally cut in half.
Exactly, and that's the halving.
So why does that matter? Like, why should anybody care about that?
Well, think about it like this. When you cut the supply of something, but the demand stays the same or even increases.
Prices go up. Simple economics.
Basic supply and demand. And that's a big part of why people get so excited about the halving, because historically it's led to some pretty impressive price rallies.
Right, like it kind of supercharges things.
Yeah.
So that happened in 2024. Now everybody's kind of like, okay, what does this mean for 2025? But, okay, I've got to mention this. It's not just the hardcore crypto folks who are paying attention anymore. Like, big institutions are getting in on the game, too.
Yeah. Big time. BlackRock, Fidelity, these are like the Wall Street giants. And they're starting to take Bitcoin seriously.
It's not just, kids in their basements mining Bitcoin anymore. Like, this is serious money coming in.
Yeah. And a big part of that is because of these spot Bitcoin ETFs. They made it way easier for institutions to invest in Bitcoin. And guess what? In 2024 alone, those spot Bitcoin ETFs, they pulled in over $52 billion in assets under management.
Billion. Okay.
With a B.
That's a whole lot of institutional money flooding into Bitcoin. So, I mean, on the one hand, that's great, right? It's like Bitcoin's getting this stamp of approval from the big players.
Right. It's like becoming more legit.
But with that legitimacy, I guess, comes the other side of the coin, which is regulation. And that's something that has a lot of people worried.
Worried, excited. I think it's a mix. Because, on the one hand, stricter regulations can feel like a threat. Like they could stifle innovation.
Yeah, absolutely. But on the other hand, some people argue that clear regulations are actually what's needed for Bitcoin to truly go mainstream.
Yeah, like it creates a level playing field, builds trust.
Right, because right now it's kind of like the Wild West out there, and nobody's quite sure what the rules are.
Exactly. And speaking of uncertainty, there are some big regulatory moves happening right now that could have a huge impact on Bitcoin. In the U.S., there's been a lot of talk about classifying Bitcoin as a strategic reserve asset.
Okay, so that would be huge. Because, I mean, we're talking about potentially putting Bitcoin on the same level as gold or oil.
Exactly. And then over in Europe, there's this thing called the MiCA framework. It's this whole set of rules that could totally reshape how crypto is treated across the EU.
So a lot of moving pieces on the regulatory front. And, of course, we can't talk about Bitcoin without talking about the global economy.
Oh, yeah. That's the backdrop for all of this.
Because, I mean, we're living in some pretty wild times, right? Inflation is still a concern.
Big time.
Interest rates are going up. And people are talking about, the possibility of a recession. So how does all of that play into the Bitcoin picture?
Well, one of the narratives around Bitcoin is that it's a hedge against inflation. So if inflation keeps rising, people might start flocking to Bitcoin as a safe haven asset.
Right, because it's decentralized, it's not controlled by any government or central bank.
Yeah.
So people see it as this sort of safe bet in uncertain times.
Exactly.
So we've got the halving, we've got institutional adoption, we've got the regulatory roller coaster, and we've got this crazy global economy in the background. I feel like my head's spinning.
Yeah, it's a lot to keep track of. But wait, there's more.
Oh no, what else?
Because while all this is going on, there are also some really exciting technological advancements happening in the Bitcoin world that could shake things up even more.
All right, lay it on me. What kind of tech stuff are we talking about here?
Well, one of the most exciting developments is something called the Lightning Network.
Okay, I've heard of that.
Yeah, it's basically like this layer 2 solution that's designed to make Bitcoin transactions faster and cheaper.
So like way faster than they are now.
Yeah, like almost instantaneous.
Okay, that's huge because one of the big criticisms of Bitcoin, right, is that it's slow, it's clunky, the fees can be high.
Exactly. So the Lightning Network is addressing those issues head on.
So, like, imagine you're at a coffee shop, right?
Yeah.
And you want to pay with Bitcoin. But you don't have to wait like 10 minutes for the transaction to go through. And you're not paying like a $5 fee on top of your latte.
Right. It's all about making Bitcoin more practical for everyday use.
Okay, so the Lightning Network, that's a big one. What else?
So there was also this big upgrade to Bitcoin back in 2021 called Taproot.
Taproot, right.
Yeah, it's kind of technical, but basically it introduced something called Schnorr signatures. And what that does is it makes transactions more efficient and more private.
So like even more private than they were before?
Exactly. And privacy is a big deal in the crypto world.
Yeah, absolutely.
People want to be able to control their own financial data.
Right, it's like that whole cyberpunk,
Yeah.
freedom from the system kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so we've got the halving, we've got institutions getting involved, we've got regulations looming, we've got this wild global economy, and we've got all this cool tech stuff happening.
It's a lot.
It's a lot. But at the end of the day, I think what people really want to know is how much is Bitcoin going to be worth in 2025?
Right. The $1 million question, or I guess the $200,000 question, based on where it is now.
Yeah, at least. So let's talk predictions. Lay it on me. What are the experts saying?
Well, keep in mind, no one can predict the future with certainty, especially when it comes to crypto.
That's volatile.
It is. But yeah, there are some smart people out there who have some interesting ideas.
Okay, let's start with the optimists, the Bitcoin bulls. Who's got the most, out there crazy prediction for 2025?
Well, Tom Lee, he's the co-founder of Fundstrat, he's calling for Bitcoin to hit $250,000.
Whoa, okay. That's a big jump. Why does he think that's going to happen?
Well, he's pointing to a couple of things. One is the post-halving scarcity that we talked about. Less supply, more demand, prices go up.
Right, makes sense.
And then he's also factoring in the growing institutional adoption, all that money coming in from BlackRock and Fidelity and those guys.
Right, so more demand from the big players. Okay. Anyone else on the bull train?
Yeah, so Vanek, they're an investment management firm. They're projecting a peak of $180,000.
Okay, a little bit lower.
A little bit lower. Their analysis is based on these historical price cycles. They're saying that 2024 and 2025 could be a time of significant outperformance for Bitcoin.
So like a big boom period.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got $250,000 from Tom Lee, $180,000 from Van Eck. Any other big numbers out there?
Yeah, one more to throw in there. Bernstein, they're a global research and investment firm. They're saying $200,000 by late 2025.
Okay, so back up to that 200K mark. What's the reasoning?
Well, they've got a whole report on this, and they're citing a bunch of factors. One is the rise of these AI-powered trading algorithms.
Oh, that's interesting. So the robots are going to be trading Bitcoin and driving the price up?
Exactly. They're also talking about the increasing availability of Bitcoin ETFs, which makes it easier for people to invest. And they think that the regulatory environment in the U.S. under the current administration is going to be pretty favorable to crypto.
Okay, so bullish on regulation. Interesting. So it sounds like there's a kind of consensus around that $200,000 mark, at least among the optimists.
Yeah, that seems to be the general ballpark.
Okay, but we got to be realistic, right?
Oh, absolutely.
There are always risks. What could go wrong? What could derail this Bitcoin train?
Well, that's where the bears come in, the Bitcoin skeptics. They're not quite as enthusiastic, obviously.
Yeah, of course. Not everyone's drinking the Bitcoin Kool-Aid.
Right, and even some of the bullish analysts, they're acknowledging that there are some potential risks.
Okay, so, what could really go wrong?
Well, Bernstein, the ones who are predicting $200,000, they're saying that stricter regulations could be a problem.
Okay, so like if governments start cracking down on Bitcoin, that could really hurt the price?
Exactly. They're estimating a 40% downside potential in that scenario.
Whoa. Okay, so instead of hitting $200,000, it could plummet down to $120,000.
Yeah, that's a pretty significant drop.
That's a lot of money to lose.
Definitely. And then there's Bitfinex. They're a cryptocurrency exchange, and they're warning about a potential capitulation cascade.
A capitulation cascade, what is that?
So imagine like a row of dominoes.
Okay, got it.
One falls, the rest follow.
They all come tumbling down.
Right. So in this case, they're saying if Bitcoin drops below $85,752, it could trigger a wave of panic selling, and that could push the price down even further.
Okay, so there are definitely some scary scenarios out there. But I got to ask, like, are there any, super crazy predictions, like the kind that make you laugh but also make you wonder, what if?
You want the Elon-esque prediction.
Yeah, give me the bold prediction.
Okay, so let's say hypothetically everything goes right for Bitcoin.
Okay, everything's perfect.
Perfect. Regulations are favorable, inflation is soaring, people are flocking to Bitcoin as a safe haven asset. Right.
And then on top of all that, some brilliant mind figures out how to solve Bitcoin scalability problems once and for all.
So it's fast, it's cheap, it's easy to use.
Exactly. In that case, some analysts believe that Bitcoin could skyrocket to $300,000, $500,000, maybe even higher by 2025.
Okay, wow. That's a lot of zeros.
It is. But like I said, that's a highly speculative scenario. A lot of things would have to go right.
Yeah, like winning the lottery and getting struck by lightning at the same time. Kind of right.
Pretty much.
Okay, so we've got the bulls, we've got the bears, we've got the super bold predictions. But, at the end of the day, what does all this mean for the average person who's just trying to make sense of Bitcoin?
I think the key takeaway is this. Bitcoin is a rapidly evolving space. It's not just a digital currency anymore. It's an asset class. It's a technology. It's a whole movement.
Right.
And trying to predict its price with any certainty is basically impossible.
So, don't put all your eggs in the Bitcoin basket, basically.
Well, I'm not giving financial advice.
Of course, of course. But I think the important thing is to stay informed, to do your research, and to understand the risks as well as the potential rewards.
Okay, so don't just blindly follow the hype. Think for yourself.
Exactly.
Okay, that's great advice. But, we've been talking a lot about the future, the price, all that stuff. But Bitcoin is also being used right now in the real world. Like, people are actually doing stuff with it.
Oh, yeah, totally.
So I think it'll be cool to kind of shift gears a little bit and talk about some of those real-world applications of Bitcoin.
Definitely.
All right, so let's get practical here. How are people actually using Bitcoin in the real world, like right now?
Well, I think one of the most basic use cases is as a store of value. Like, we were talking about digital gold earlier.
Right, Bitcoin is digital gold.
Yeah, so Bitcoin's limited supply, it's decentralized, it's not controlled by any government. It's got a lot of appeal for people who are looking for an alternative to traditional currencies, especially in places where, maybe the local currency is not so stable or there's high inflation.
Right, like a safe haven asset.
Exactly.
Okay, but Bitcoin was originally intended as a way to make payments, right? Like that was the whole point of it.
Yeah, that was the vision, peer-to-peer electronic cash. But the reality is mainstream adoption for everyday transactions, it's still kind of slow.
Yeah.
One of the biggest hurdles is that volatility we were talking about. Like, imagine you go to the store and you buy a bunch of groceries with Bitcoin, and then the next day, the price of Bitcoin crashes.
Ouch.
Yeah, you basically just paid double for your groceries.
Nobody wants that.
Not really. So it's not ideal for, those day-to-day transactions, at least not yet.
Okay. But I have heard that Bitcoin payments are starting to catch on in some places.
Oh, yeah, definitely. There are online businesses that accept Bitcoin. Some brick-and-mortar stores are starting to experiment with it, especially in, tech hubs or places where there's a lot of crypto enthusiasm.
Right. And, of course, the Lightning Network, that's going to play a big role in making Bitcoin payments more practical, right?
Absolutely. As the Lightning Network grows, transactions get faster, they get cheaper, and it just becomes easier for businesses to accept Bitcoin.
Okay, so we've got the store of value, we've got the potential for payments. What other interesting uses are there for Bitcoin? Like stuff that maybe people aren't really aware of.
Well, one area that I think is really promising is microfinance.
Microfinance. Okay, explain that one to me.
So microfinance is all about providing financial services to people who don't have access to traditional banking.
Right.
Like people in developing countries who maybe don't have a bank account or good credit history. And Bitcoin can be a really powerful tool for that.
Oh, so?
Because with Bitcoin, all you need is a mobile phone and an internet connection, and you can send and receive money anywhere in the world.
Oh, I see. So it bypasses the whole traditional banking system.
Exactly. And that's huge for people who are excluded from that system.
Yeah, that's a really cool application. What about remittances? Like sending money across borders. That's a huge market.
Oh, yeah. Remittances are a perfect use case for Bitcoin. Because, if you're using traditional remittance services, the fees can be outrageous.
Yeah.
And it can take forever for the money to get there.
Yeah.
But with Bitcoin, it's much faster, much cheaper, and you don't have to deal with all those exchange rate headaches.
Right, because Bitcoin is a global currency.
Mm.
Okay, so we've got microfinance, we've got remittances. I mean, those are pretty big deals.
Yeah, they are. And those are just a couple of examples.
Right, like the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
So looking ahead, how do you see these applications evolving over the next few years?
I think one area where we're going to see a lot of growth is micropayments. Like the Lightning Network, we were talking about how that's making Bitcoin payments faster and cheaper. Well, that also opens up the possibility of making tiny payments, like fractions of a penny.
Okay.
And that could revolutionize the way we pay for things online. Like imagine you're reading an article online and you want to tip the writer, but
Right.
you don't want to go through the hassle of setting up a whole subscription or anything. With micropayments, you could just instantly send them a few cents.
Oh, interesting. So it's like, throwing a quarter in a musician's hat, but online.
Yeah, exactly. And that could be applied to all sorts of things, like, paying for individual songs instead of buying a whole album, or, tipping content creators on social media.
Right. So it's like a way to support creators directly.
Exactly. And because these micropayments are so efficient, it also opens up the possibility of machine-to-machine payments.
Machine.
Yeah, so like imagine a vending machine that automatically pays for its own restocking.
Okay, that's trippy.
Or a smart home device that settles its electricity bill in real time.
So like a future where machines are using Bitcoin to interact with each other.
Exactly. And that could have all sorts of implications that we haven't even thought of yet.
It's like the Internet of Things, but with Bitcoin as the currency.
Yeah, it's pretty wild to think about.
It is. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground today. We talked about price predictions, we talked about technology, we talked about real-world applications. But I think it's important to step back for a minute and acknowledge that, at the end of the day, Bitcoin is a human creation. It's driven by human aspirations, human hopes, human fears.
Absolutely. It's easy to get caught up in the numbers and the technology, but we can't lose sight of the human element.
Right. And I think that's one of the things that makes Bitcoin so fascinating. It's like this mirror that reflects back at us our own relationship with money, with technology, with power.
I like that.
A mirror. Yeah, and it's a tool, a powerful tool that can be used for good or for bad.
That's true of any technology, I suppose.
Right. So it's up to us as a society to decide how we want to use this tool to shape its future in a way that benefits everyone.
Couldn't agree more.
So to all our listeners out there, as you continue to explore the world of Bitcoin, remember to think critically.
Yeah, don't just buy into the hype.
Do your own research. Consider different perspectives. And most importantly, never stop learning. The future of Bitcoin is being written right now, and who knows, maybe you'll be one of the authors.
Maybe you will.
Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.
Until next time.